This is Professor Christian with Everest University, and I'm just covering some internet resources. And as you remember from the readings, they covered a couple of different search databases that end up costing money. And there's a lot of information you can get for free. So I'm going to cover a couple of those areas that you can get information for free and why you might use them. You're not going to use all of these. And one important thing to remember is that the more technologically savvy the individual is that you're looking for, the more likely you're going to find information about them. If somebody is older, they tend not to be as easy to find. If they didn't own anything, didn't have a phone number registered to them, didn't pay any bills out of their name, there are people out there that are like that. Plenty of people in older generations where maybe the wife didn't work and she didn't have anything in her name, so everything would be under the husband's name. So when you first talk to a client, you're going to do an interview and get as much information as you can about the person that you're looking for, about the people that they know, about, just anything you can about them, with their hobbies, their likes, their dislikes. I mean, you want to be pointed in the right direction. And of course, why you're looking for them. So here is our first one is Google. And several of you pointed out that Google is a very good search engine. You can use Google, Bing, Yahoo. Those are the three, well, I don't know if it's Bing anymore, but anyway, so the Microsoft version now, you can use any of those and find different information. So you might want to do a search if you can't find it in Google, run a search in Yahoo because they all have different algorithms that bring up different information. So Google, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, it focuses on the parameters that provide Google money, and they all do this, but Google is very good about this. So if a website is advertising Google on them and Google's making money off of them, they're going to promote that site more than somebody else, which would be like a government site where you might find free information. So here is Google, and there are a couple different things that you want to do. First, you want to go ahead and run a search for the person's name. But if you put the person's name in, unless they have an extremely unique name, you are not going to be able to find them on the first try. I mean, you might if they're famous and there's lots of articles about them or something. But for the most part, you're going to have to put in some sort of qualifier with it as well. So you might put in, let's say if we're looking for John Smith in Fort Worth, Texas, right? So we might look, and you don't have to use the commas up here. I just do that by habit. But one of the first things that pops up, John Peter Smith Hospital. So right there, we know we're going to have a problem finding John Smith in Fort Worth, Texas. Though we would probably have a problem finding John Smith in any city, anywhere. But this is just an example. So you can go through and see if you can find them. Obituaries. Sometimes you can get access to these, sometimes you can't. Facebook will come up, and sometimes it's the right person, sometimes it's not. So if you have more, it's not always just the city. You want to do John Smith in some sort of qualifier. So it could be, let's say that he went to Timber Creek High School. That's the one. This one right here is in Tarrant County. Yeah, so it's in Fort Worth, I believe. So Timber Creek High School. And we might go through and see if that pops anything. And you can see this is one because I already have it pulled up for the Facebook page. I wouldn't normally know this or do this, but this is for speed. So you might look through and see if you find anything. You say, no, okay, well, let's see, what else can I do? And there are, if you have a phone number, you can run a phone number. And this one's kind of funny because I did this. So my phone number when I was a little kid was a 702 number, but it changed to 775 because I lived in northern Nevada and they switched the zip codes in the mid-90s maybe. And I Googled this the other day just to see what would come up, and I did it as 775 because it happened to be that when I moved into my apartment, the same phone number that I used to have as a kid was their fax machine. So 6926. So I Googled the number, which keep in mind, I haven't had this phone number for at least 25 years, maybe 30 years. And not 25, let's go with 25 years. So they have this number and they say, okay, San Pebble Spanish Oak Village in Sparks, Nevada. That's the apartment complex that had it as their fax machine right here. Fax. So that's interesting. And then you can scroll through, and I saw this the other day and it just cracked me up right here. That is my mother. And they still have it as the 775, and it links to a couple other numbers. So these are old numbers for her, and we could follow those numbers and keep following up and see if we can find some current information if we were looking for her. So that is one way you can do a search. When you do a phone number search, you see how I have these here, the old traditional way. You'll want to do it multiple ways. So you might do it this way. They should generally bring up the same information, but sometimes it doesn't. So it just depends on how it was entered into a website and how Google's reading it, things like that. So that's why you want to put in different methods. Now, there are lots of different things that you can search for on Google. If it's on the internet and not somehow intentionally blocked, Google's going to find it. Now, it's just how you pull that information out. So Google actually has this how to search on Google, and they have, start with the basics, and they say just do a simple search. They, talk about using your voice. They talk about spelling. It's not as critical in spelling unless the word means something or it's a name. Capitalization doesn't matter. Then, they have all these other things. You can go in and do search operators where, they talk about if you want to look for certain things. So these are all more advanced, and if you ever have time to sit around and look and check out Google, that might be worth it. So some other things that you might search. So let's say, here's an example. So my ex-husband, he has a blog site. I don't know why, because it doesn't say anything interesting. My current husband checked it out a couple times, and he's like, that's just lame. But anyway, if I wanted to, let's say that I'm like, okay, let's say that I'm getting a divorce. And if my husband at the time had a blog site, he would probably, if he was smart, but most people don't do this, clean up his blog site so that he's not ranting or raving about me, because I can print that off and take it to the judge. Well, let's say that he was smart and he decided to clean up his site before filing for divorce or something. And before we got into a big fight about it, and I wasn't keeping the evidence because I thought I was going to be married to him forever, and now I need it. Well, this is called the Wayback Machine. It's on archive.org. Just go to archive.org, and you can see that this is the Wayback Machine. You can type it in. So I put in everest.edu, and you can see that there's a graph here that shows how many times, this is the estimated traffic level, and these are all different snapshots. So if I wanted to see what it looked like, let's go back to 2013. This doesn't always work, but so here's a big day. They have multiple snapshots that day on June 1st. So this is what it looked like on June 1st. So you can see different things. Sometimes you can click around, sometimes you can't. The Wayback Machine is just a snapshot, so it doesn't always keep all the coding and everything. So this is one way that you could find out, if you're like, okay, I know 2 months ago he was ranting and raving about me on his blog and he's taken it off. You can check and see if there was a snapshot of it on here, and you could then get that information. So that's one way that you can do that. And of course, I wouldn't do that personally. I would do that for a client, not as a private investigator for a client. So I would ask, if I ran across a blog and I said, oh, I want to see what that used to look like, I could go in and see what it looked like as long as they're snapshots. It doesn't do every single day, so it's hit and miss, but it's definitely worth it if you're trying to dig up some information. Now, let's go back to John Smith in Timber Creek High School. So I've gone on Facebook, and we're just going to have to say John Smith doesn't exist. There's just too many to figure out. So you can search by name, and many of you did that. Then you can also do some other searches. So I'm on Facebook, I'm logged in. This is the Timber Creek High School fan page or public presence, essentially. And you can see that there's people posting on here. But what's interesting about this is that you can go onto the page and you can see that there's a lot of visits, but you can see how many people have liked the page. I am very surprised there's only 32 likes on here. But you can go in and you can see all 32 people who have liked this page. So hopefully, with over 2,000 students, you think there'd be more than 32 likes. But you could go in and you could scroll through if let's say the person graduated from here, or if the person taught here even. You could go through and see if I don't even know if there's a John Smith here, so I'm just scrolling down to show you that you can see everybody's profiles. None of them are blocked. Now you might go into the profile and it is blocked, but now you at least have a better information. Like this tells you a lot of information already. Works at General Electric, this one's a stay-at-home mom. I mean, you've got, this one's in Keller, Texas. I mean, they tell you a lot of information without clicking into it. So you can, and that's going backwards. So you can't find John Smith's profile, but maybe if John Smith has a profile, he might have liked this page. You can go in. You could also go in. There's a couple of other places, if you get serious about it, that are paid sites. You can go into find, classmates, track down some classmates if you're trying to go back and find information about someone. I wouldn't go too far back on high school things. This is just one way to find some information. So now the biggest way to find free information that is valid information is through government sites. Now, because I don't have anybody right now that I can actually search for that is a criminal, we're going to go with a property search, and we're going to look at Tarrant County, because that's where Fort Worth is Tarrant County in Texas. And this site, what it is if they own any property, then they should be in here somewhere. So we don't know if John Smith owns any property unless we've asked that in advance. So let's say that, the mother's looking for him. She's maybe from San Antonio or something. It says, I know my son's up here. He moved back up here. I'm trying to look for him because his father's dying, and, we need to get back in touch with him, and, whatever the story is. And you say, okay, well, John Smith in Fort Worth, that's what and you know that he owns property. Oh yeah, he was big about owning a house. He said he had to own a house. She tells you this, and so you're like, okay, well, more than likely John Smith is here and he owns some property. So you could go in and you could say John Smith, and if you don't know the city in this case, you can leave it as all cities. We are going to go with residential, and we're going to see, okay, I don't know what city he's in, so I'm going to leave it as all cities. Or you could narrow it down. If she's like, well, I'm pretty sure he really liked Fort Worth, so you could even narrow it down to Fort Worth. But we're going to go with all cities for now. And I'm going to do a search. And I can see that there are 85 matches for John Smith owning property in Tarrant County, Texas. So I could go through and I could eliminate some of them easily and some of them not as easily. Like here's John Smith in Watauga, John Smith in Bedford, John Smith in Tarrant County, John Smith in Arlington. There's no way to narrow these down. I mean, you can look in there and see, like say, let's go into John Smith in Burleson. You can say, okay, well, when did he move in here? I know there's prior owners, so let's see. You know that this was 1/31/2017. That's today. And you can say, okay, so this is the data's current as of this date. So the current owner is John Smith and Ellen Smith. Oh, Ellen's the wrong one. Or, oh yeah, John's wife's name is Ellen. Let's say that she told you that. Okay, so this could be him. Let's see when they moved here. And you can see here they've got the deed date going back to 2005 because that's probably when the property was broken out. So you go, okay, well, 2009, it looks like in 2009 this was sold to them. So she told you, well, yeah, if she said, oh, well, he didn't leave San Antonio until 2012, that's not him anymore because he probably didn't own property in Burleson at the same time he was living down in San Antonio happy with his family and didn't tell them. So now you can say, okay, well, this isn't him. Or she says, oh, yeah, he left in 2008. Well, this is a really good chance that this is a valid address then, and I want to do more research on it. I might then go back to Google and do more searches where I put John Smith and Burleson, Texas in there, or John Smith and that address, the 937 Yucca Court, exactly. So there are a lot of different ways to find information. And the hardest part is really getting that information out of your client. Because if the client doesn't give you the information, it's very difficult to track it down. Now, ideally, you have a social security number and you're using, a private investigator database, but if you're in a state that doesn't have licensing, it's going to be difficult to gain access to those. And it's also going to be costly regardless because, the good ones cost, you have to pay like $75 a month, and then to run a full report on the person and not even dig that deep, it's going to cost you like another $25 per, you know, search. Like if you want to do a comprehensive search through their database, it's $25. So now you're paying $75 a month. If you're only doing a handful of those, that gets kind of expensive, and you're not necessarily recovering all of that. And that's why a lot of these legitimate background checks cost $50 plus, because the information you can get through the private investigator databases is much more accurate than through any of the public ones. That includes all the ones that we've talked about in class where you pay for money. You can get accurate information from them, but I've done searches on myself where it has people listed to me I've never met, I've never heard of, I have no idea why they're linked to me, or it's linking me to people who lived in a house that I lived in 10 years ago, and we've never, there's a 10-year gap between them now and me then, and no idea why they're linking that. But there's no way you would know that unless I only know that because that's my information. So that's why these private investigator databases are much more important to a private investigator than the paid searches that you can do through white pages or through even the Zaba search. And, some of those will give you some good information, but if you have to go much more past what they give you for free, then you might as well be paying for a private investigator database that's legitimate. And depending on where you are in the country, there are different databases that specialize in that. So when you get that far, if you decide that you want to get into private investigation, you'll definitely want to get with your state association. I think almost every state has an association. So you'll definitely want to get in touch with them as a student if you can. It's usually much cheaper. Meet some people and find out what the databases are that are best for that area. And with online, it's a lot easier now to do more research, but not everything can be done online. So that's important to know. And again, there's a lot more to learn about these. There's a lot more databases out there. Most of the time, you're going to have to try to dig past that first page on Google, or you'll have to come up with qualifiers to try to refine your search to a point where you're eliminating all of those, ones that could be wrong, or the ones that are going to charge you and not give you any more information than you have. So, but again, more information you can get from the client, the better. The more you play with the databases and you learn what databases are available to you that are free, the better off you're going to be, because you can do more work in the searches faster if you know where you're looking and you're familiar with them. So if that's something that you're interested in, I recommend, just touch base with your state association for private investigators and start working with them. The sooner the better. And until then, good luck, and I hope you guys enjoyed this.